So the election is over and it sucks. It really does. Vice President Harris didn't do it. Donald Trump will once again be our president. And I, like many of you, have lots of thoughts, lots of feelings. I think it's important to just acknowledge that and to give yourself space to go through the stages of grief. There's going to be a lot of postmortems and people who want to place blame and who want to say what should have been done differently or what caused this to happen. There will be plenty of time for that, and I have thoughts of my own that I will share in due time. But there are really just two points that I want to emphasize right now while all of this is fresh. First, an observation. Donald Trump won. Kamala Harris didn't lose. Donald Trump won across the board. Donald Trump overperformed everywhere, in every swing state, in every district. His performance shocked even his own campaign. The extent to which Democrats underperformed in this election is mind boggling. The polls showed that this was close, 50-50 race. In the end, when it came down to the margins in the important counties and states across the country, Donald Trump dominated. If you look at the maps that show the rightward shift in this election compared to 2020, it's all red. It's important to note that because in times like this, it's very easy to say, well, if this group had voted a certain way or if this were different, and it's bigger than that. You know, Donald Trump has been a major political figure in this country for 10 years. He's been president before. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows about all the baggage. And still, a majority of the country, not just the electoral college math, but likely winning the popular vote, the majority of the country decided that this was their selection. And so the reality is that the world as we know it is changing. It has changed. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Donald Trump represents and now has a mandate to dramatically alter how this country operates, what our domestic agenda is, and what our foreign policy agenda is. Sure, everybody's heard about Project 2025 and whether that's his plan or not. The fact is, we know some of the things that he's going to do. We know, for instance, that NATO, the alliance that emerged after World War II between the United States and Europe, that's likely going to end. We know that the United States is increasingly under Donald Trump going to abandon those traditional allies in favor of more autocrats and dictators. We know domestically that people who are going to be in his administration now, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who have certain views and who are more anti-science and more contrarian, they're going to be in charge of things like healthcare and things like education. So we know, for instance, that our water may no longer contain fluoride in the coming years. We know that regulations are going to be slashed. On top of everything that has already happened, we know that the world that we have lived in, this idea of a liberal democratic world order that has existed for decades, going back to the fall of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, that's over. It's over and it's going to continue to end. And it's important that we acknowledge that and we reckon with it. You know, throughout history, there are these big shifts, and it's hard to make sense of it when you're living in the middle of it. But it's important that we, as people who believe in certain ideals and want this country to live up to them and to make progress and to do right by all people, especially those who are marginalized, it's important for people who feel that way to be prepared for what is about to happen. And it isn't to scare you, but it is so that you can be ready to deal with it and figure out how to navigate it so that the ultimate prize that we're shooting for does not get lost. The second point that I want to make is that it's really easy in these moments to say that, everybody who voted for Donald Trump is racist, is anti-women, woman is sexist, is anti everything, that they are a bad person. And while there are certainly some people who feel that way and are those things, and they voted for Donald Trump, that's not true of all of his supporters. Again, a majority of the country voted for Donald Trump. What we have to understand is that elections are complicated. Who a person chooses to vote for is a complicated and complex decision. And generally speaking, people either vote for certain things or they vote against certain things. And when you get a big election like for president, those factors combine, right? You're looking at a candidate and you're saying, well, do I feel more strongly for this thing than I do against these other things? And how that yields and equates to a voting decision is complex for everybody. So the first thing, as angry as we are, and that anger is certainly righteous, the first thing we must do is resist the urge to simply say, hey, anyone who voted for Donald Trump, never speak to me. Those people are trash. They deserve no good things. We must resist that urge. And the reason we must resist that is because we have to understand that for the vast majority of people who voted for Donald Trump, they voted for something that they see in him. It isn't necessarily that they voted against a woman's right to choose, or they voted against democracy, or they voted against Black people, or they voted against trans people. It isn't so much that. It's that they saw something in Donald Trump and they voted for that. And we have to understand what that thing is. What do they see in Donald Trump? Because it's real. And if we don't begin to try to understand that, you'll never be able to reach those people. You'll never be able to bring them into the tent and the things that we care about and the things that we vote for. You'll never get them into a coalition so that we can make progress on those things. And so I don't know what the next 4 years are going to be like. I'm prepared for the worst, and maybe it won't be as bad as that. But I do know this: I'm not going to stand by idly. I am going to push and I'm going to continue to advocate. But specifically, what I'm going to advocate for is for the Democratic Party and progressives and liberals and, whatever label you want to use. If you believe in these ideals, however you call yourself, I'm going to continue to push and make sure that that coalition tries to understand what it is that Donald Trump has captured and what those people are voting for. What are they saying? What do they want? And we have to understand, how can we talk about policy and how can we talk about our ideals and how can we speak to our plans in a way that resonates. It seems counterintuitive that you could have a voter who voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016, who voted for Barack Obama in 2012 and 2008, and voted for Donald Trump. It could seem weird that a person could support and vote for people all across the political spectrum like that. But people are complex. And really, for the average voter, they're not super tapped into the intricacies of policy. They're not super tapped into the day to day. What they care about is the emotion of, I feel like the system is rigged against me. I feel like I'm not getting a fair shake. I feel like I need to be able to have a champion who's looking out for me because government isn't looking out for me, business isn't looking out for me, no one is looking out for me. And that's what Donald Trump tapped into. Same thing Bernie Sanders tapped into. Their policy views are completely different, but that emotion is real. And Democrats have lost the way in speaking to that. You know, 25, 30 years ago, it was Republicans who were seen as the elites, the party of big business. And yes, while Donald Trump is a rich man and he has rich friends like Elon Musk who are supporting him, now the Democrats are the elites. The Democrats are the ones who are seen as the establishment. And for so many Americans, they feel left out of that and they're looking for a champion. And so going forward, we have to figure out a way to reach those people. And we can't just do it with words and proposals, but as there are changes at the federal level, we have to understand that we have to continue to be engaged and active and vote, especially on the state and local level. State and local governments are going to be the guardrails and they're going to be the bastions of innovation. So if you voted, if you didn't vote this election, please make sure you vote in the next election for governor, for state senate, for mayor, whenever there's an election, vote because we can't wait every 4 years to try to change the makeup of the White House and Congress in DC to try to push these policies through. It's too volatile. We have to be building infrastructure at a local and state level to make sure that we are protecting against whatever crazy stuff is going on in the Trump administration, but also that we are building a groundswell of support where people can feel it and they can understand how these ideals and the visions that we have and the plans and policies that we want to enact, how those impact their lives and give them a leg up and the ability to get ahead. It's got to be more than just rhetoric. It's got to be something that they can feel. And so I would encourage you to just be ready. The world is changing. The world has changed. And we can't just close our ears and cover our eyes and not try to understand why a majority of the country, even knowing everything that they know about Donald Trump, still said that this is the choice that we want to make for president. We have to try to understand what are they voting for and how can we create space in our coalition where they can see themselves. Take care of yourselves and be easy. Talk soon.